طيبة كأنها رائحة جد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. فقلت نعم إن جدك تحت الكساء. فأقبل الحسن نحو الكساء فقال السلام عليك يا جده يا رسول الله، وأتآذن لأن أدخل معك تحت الكساء. فقال وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا صاحب حوزي قد أذنت لك. فدخل معه تحت الكساء فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بوليدي الحسين قد أقبل وقال السلام عليك يا أمه. فقلت وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا خرتين وثمرات فوادي. فقال لي يا أمه إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة أنها رائحة جدي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله. فقلت نعم إن جدك وقع تحت الكساء. فدنا الحسين نحو الكساء فقال السلام عليك يا جده السلام عليك يا من اختاره الله. أتآذن لأن أكون معكما تحت الكساء. فقال وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا شفيع أمتي قد أذنت لك. فدخل معهما تحت الكساء فأقبل عند ذلك أبو الحسن علي ابن أبي طالب.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.
وقال السلام عليك يا بنت رسول الله. فقلت وعليك السلام يا أبا الحسن ويا أمير المؤمنين. فقال يا فاطمة إني أشم إنك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة أخي وابن أمي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. فقلت نعم إن جدك فأمه أما والديك تحت الكساء. أقبل علي نحو الكساء وقال السلام عليك يا رسول الله وتآذن لأن أكون معكم تحت الكساء. قال وعليك السلام يا أخي ويا وسيئي وخليفتي وصاحب اللواء قد أذنت لك. فدخل علي تحت الكساء ثم أتيت نحو الكساء وقلت السلام عليك يا أبا يا رسول الله تآذن لأن أكون معكم تحت الكساء. قال وعليك السلام يا بنتي يا بسرتي قد أذنت لك. فدخلت تحت الكساء فلما أكتملنا جامعا تحت الكساء أخذ أبي رسول الله بطرفي الكساء وأومي بيده اليمنى إلى السماء وقال اللهم إنه أولى أهل البيت وقصتي وهمتي لحمهم لحمي وهم دمهم دمي يؤلموني ويؤلمهم ويزونني ما يزونهم. أنا هارب لمن هاربهم وسلم لمن سألامهم وعدو لمن أعداءهم ومحب لمن أحبهم. إنهم مني وأنا منهم. فأجل صلواتك وبركاتك ورحمتك وغفرانك ورضوانك علي وعليهم وأذهب عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.
فقال الله عز وجل يا ملائكتي ويا سكان السماوات إني ما خلقت سماء متوالا أرضا متوالا قمرا منيوالا شمسا متوالا ولا يدور ولا بحر يجري ولا فلك يسري إلا في محبتي هؤلاء الخمسة الذين هم تحت الكساء.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.
فقال الأمين جبرائيل يا ربي ومن تحت الكساء. فقال عز وجل هم أهل البيت النبوة ومعدن رسالتهم فاطمة وأبوها وبالها وبانوها.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.
فقال جبرائيل يا ربي أتآذن لأن أهبط إلى الأرض لأكون معهم سادسا. فقال له نعم قد أذنت لك. فهبط الأمين جبرائيل وقال السلام عليك يا رسول الله لا يقرئك السلام ويقصك بالتحية والإكرام ويقول لك وعزتي وجلالي إني ما خلقت السماء مبتوالا أرضا مبتوالا قمرا مبتوالا شمسا مبتوالا ولا فلك يدور ولا بحر يجري ولا فلك يسري إلا لأجلكم ومحبتكم وقد أذن لي أن أدخل معكم فقلت آذن لي يا رسول الله. فقال رسول الله وعليك السلام يا أمين وهي الله فإنه نعم قد أذنت لك. فتقال جبريل معنا تحت الكساء فقال لأبي إن الله قد أوحى إليكم يقول إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.
فقال علي لأبي يا رسول الله أخبرني ما لجلوسنا هذا تحت الكساء من الفضل عند الله. فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم والذي بعثني بالحق نبي واصطفاني برسالتي نجيء ما ذكر كبار هذا في محافل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيهم جمع من شياطين وموهبين إلا ونزلت عليهم الرحمة وحافت بهم المال كنت واستغفرت لهم إلا أن يتفرقوا. وقال علي عليه السلام إذا والله فزنا وفاز الشياطين رب الكعبة.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.
فقال أبي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم ثانيا يا علي والذي بعثني بالحق نبي واصطفاني برسالتي نجي ما ذكر كبارنا هذا في محافل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيهم جمع من شياطين وموهبين وفيهم مهموم إلا فرج الله همه ولا مغموم إلا وكشف الله غمه وطالب الحاجة إلا وقاضي له حاجته. فقال علي عليه السلام إذن والله فزنا وسعدنا وكذلك شاتونا فآزر وسعدت في الدنيا والآخرة إلى رب الكعبة.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.
Please recite Surah Al-Hamd and 3 times Surah Ikhlas for Panchatan Park.
Bismillah.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.
MashaAllah. Well done, beta. Well done, Hamza. Mustafa, it's your turn now. Please start, beta.
Salawat.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. صدق اللہ العلی العظیم.
اللهم صل على محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
فدا ہو اس پہ سلامی ہے جس کا نام حسین میرا موئی میرا آقا میرا امام حسین فدا ہو اس پہ شبا کو بیچ کے روزے پہ کر رہا دعا کرے قبول الہی میرا سلام حسین فدا ہو اس پہ جو کربلا کے زمین پر ہوا کیا ورود تو پھر کے دیکھتے تھے قبر کا مقام حسین فدا ہوا اس پہ سنانا ہے کسی سنگ دل نے لقمہ رسول کیا ہوں نواسا ہے میرا نام حسین فدا ہوا اس پہ نہ پوچھو وقت وہ کیسے تھا جب مدینے سے چلے ہر ایک کام لیتے ہوئے سلام حسین فدا ہوا اس پہ پناہ نہ لیتے تھے دشمن اجل کے دامن میں جو وار کرتے تھے لے کر علی کا نام حسین فدا ہوا اس پہ میری کچھ اور تمنا نہیں ہے اے مولا یہ آرزو ہے بنا لے مجھے غلام حسین فدا ہوا اس پہ
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وجل فرجه.
ماشاءاللہ ماشاءاللہ جزاک اللہ بچوں. جی صلوات پر محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل
ہاں بولی ماں کیا ہوا سکینہ کو غشیے کیوں آ گیا غشیے کیوں آ گیا سکینہ کیوں یہ خاموش ہو گئی آخر کس نے کیا کہہ دیا
سکینہ
کس نے کیا کہہ دیا
سکینہ
کیا خبر اس کو کیا ہوا بیٹا دیکھو آپ ذرا سکینہ کو دیکھو آپ ذرا
سکینہ
آئے غربت میں چھین کر مجھ سے لے گئی کیوں خزا سکینہ کو لے گئی کیوں خزا سکینہ کو بولی ماں کیا ہوا. فاتحہ. زنداں میں مقید ہوئے جس دم ہر ہمیشہ انبوہ خلائق ہوا دروازے پناہگاہ بلوا ہوا اس درجے کی مزدود ہوئی راہ سر شرم سے زنجیر پا سر شرم سے زنجیر پا عابد نے رکھا تھا وہ عرق شرم اسیروں کے نتن میں روتا تارے گازو روتا تارے گازو غم شاہ زمان مشغول جو تھے کھیل میں اطفال وہ سارے کرتی تھی سکینہ وہاں حسرت سے نظارے کہتی تھی کہ کیا ہو گئے ہم جولی ہمارے بابا علی اصغر کو بابا علی اصغر کو کہاں لے کے سب بچے یہاں کھیلتے ہیں خندہ زنا ہے میں کھیلتی تھی جن سے وہ میں کھیلتی تھی جن سے وہ اطفال کا ناگاہ نمودار ہوئی شام غریباں آیا غضب آلود وہاں شمر بدیمہ ایک ایک سے مخاطب ہوا وہ دشمن یزداں اب جاؤ کہ ہوتا ہے اب جاؤ کہ ہوتا ہے مقابل در زندہ کوئے گرہائی نہ کبھی آل ابا کی کل دیکھیو پھر سے کل دیکھیو پھر سے اسیران بلا یہ سن کے پریشان ہوا امبو وہ سارا غم ہو گیا ایک شخص کا فرزند ہزارہ چلایا پدر اس کا رہا دل پن یارا فرزند بھی بابا اسے فرزند بھی بابا اسے کہہ کے پکارا وہ طفل لپٹنے جو لگا آ کے پدر سے پیدا ہوئے پیدا ہوئے سکینہ کے جگر بھر بھر کے دمے سرد یہ کی بانو سے گفتار اس بچے کو دیکھو کہ کیا خوش ہے یہ دلدار کیا نام پدر پیار سے لیتا ہے ہر ایک بار ایک ہم ہے کہ ہے باپ کی ایک ہم ہے کہ ہے باپ کی فرقت میں گرفتار دل میں جو میرے درد ہے خالق پہ آیا ہے میں کس کو کہوں باپ میں کس کو کہوں باپ میرا باپ کہاں بابا میرے ہوتے تو انہیں کہتی میں بابا اب باپ کہاں جس کو کہوں باپ میں دکھیا یوں کوئی پدر بیٹی سے غافل نہیں ہوتا حیران ہوں بابا کے حیران ہوں بابا کے حیران ہوں بابا کے وہ اشواق ہوئے آدان نے ہمیں قید کیا شام میں لا کر بابا میرے کیوں مجھ کو بابا میرے کیوں مجھ کو نہیں ڈھونڈتے یہ کہہ کے سکینہ پجو رقت ہوئی تاری بس ہائے پدر کہہ کے کئی بار پکاری تڑپی جو زمین پر تو زمین ہل گئی ساری جھنجلا کے کہا شمر نے جھنجلا کے کہا شمر نے پھر کرتی ہو زاری اب خوب رلاؤں گا تجھے میں نہ ڈروں گا رات تجھ کو اسیروں سے رات تجھ کو اسیروں سے جدا قید کروں گا پھر شمر نے بازوئے سکینہ کو جو پکڑا کنبے کی طرف اس نے عجب یا سے دیکھا سب قیدیوں میں قیامت ہوئی برپا سجاد کے قدموں پر سجاد کے قدموں پر مچل کر گری دکھی سجاد کے قدموں پر مچل کر گری دکھیا یوں لپٹی تھی بھائی سے وہ اس خوف و خطر سے ایک ہاتھ تو گردن میں تھا ایک ہاتھ تو گردن میں تھا ایک ہاتھ کمر میں منہ دیکھ کے سجاد کا کہتی تھی وہ ڈر کر اب آپ میرے رونے کے ضامن ہو برادر گر تم سے چھٹی زیست میری ہوئے گی کیوں کر اب رو تو جو چاہے اب رو تو جو چاہے کرے شمر ستم بھیا مجھے تو شمر بھیا مجھے تو شمر سے اس وقت بچا لے اب رو تو کر دیجیو اب رو تو کر دیجیو ظالم کے حوالے اب روئی سو میں روئی نا پھر روں گی زنہار اب رو اگر باپ کو اپنے تو گناہگار فرماؤ کہ اب چھوڑ دے مجھ کو یہ جفاکار بازو میرا دکھنے لگا بازو میرا دکھنے لگا اے عابد بیما کس طرح جدا کنبے سے ہوئے گی سکینہ تم کہہ دو قسم کھا کے تم کہہ دو قسم کھا کے نہ روئے گی سکینہ یہ کہتی تھی کہ کھینچا جو ستمگر نے خزارہ کرتا تو پھٹا تھا وہ پھٹا اور بھی سارا تب عابد بیمار نے رو کر یہ پکارا اے شمر یہ بن باپ کی اے شمر یہ بن باپ کی بچی ہے خدا غافل تیری دہشت سے نہ ہوئے گی سکینہ اب ایسا ڈری ہے کہ نہ اب ایسا ڈری ہے کہ نہ روئے گی سکینہ زندہ میں مقید ہوئے محمد گزارش ہے محمد سے کہ محمد پلیز کم آن لائن بیٹا
صلوات تھا یہ بانو کا بیان کس کو دوں اب لوریاں ڈھونڈتی پھرتی ہے مادر اے میرا اصغر کہاں تیرا جھولا جل گیا اے میرے تشنا دہاں، ڈھونڈتی پھرتی ہے مادر اے میرا اصغر کہاں، خوب برا کرتا تیرا ہائے وہ بھی چھن گیا، خوب برا کرتا تیرا ہائے وہ بھی چھن گیا، اب جیوں کس کے سہارے پاس میرے کیا رہا، زندگی حیران گاہ عمر بھر وہ نوحہ خواں، ڈھونڈتی پھرتی ہے مادر اے میرا اصغر کہاں، ہائے وہ نازک گلا 3 دن سے خشک تھا، ہائے وہ نازک گلا 3 دن سے خشک تھا، برق موج تیر نے وہ اس قدر زخمی کیا، تر ہوئی خون سے زباں، تر ہوئی خون سے زباں، لے سکے نہ ہچکیاں، ڈھونڈتی پھرتی ہے مادر اے میرا اصغر کہاں، خالی جھولا دیکھ کر اے میرے نور نظر، خالی جھولا دیکھ کر اے میرے نور نظر، قبر آتی ہے میری اور روتا ہے جگر، سو گئے ہو تم کہاں، سو گئے ہو تم کہاں، چین پائے کیسے ماں، ڈھونڈتی پھرتی ہے مادر اے میرا اصغر کہاں، میں مسافر شام کی ختم حد آرام کی، میں مسافر شام کی ختم حد آرام کی، قید ہو کر جا رہی ہوں گرد ہے عالم کی، بن چکی ہے ریسماں، بن چکی ہے ریسماں، ہم کہاں اور تم کہاں، ڈھونڈتی پھرتی ہے مادر اے میرا اصغر کہاں، میر کیا ریحان کیا جس نے یہ نوحہ سنا، میر کیا ریحان کیا جس نے یہ نوحہ سنا، اشک آنکھوں سے بہا کر اس نے رو رو کر کہا، ہائے ہے اصغر کی ماں اف وہ تیرا امتحان، ڈھونڈتی پھرتی ہے مادر اے میرا اصغر کماں، تیرا جھولا چل گیا اے میرے تشنا دہاں، ڈھونڈتی پھرتی ہے مادر اے میرا اصغر کہاں، صلوات
ماشاء اللہ بیٹا ماشاء اللہ، جزاک اللہ محمد۔ گزارش ہے حیدر بھائی سے کہ تشریف لائیں اور آج کی مناسبت سے جو مرثیے کا انہوں نے انتخاب کیا برائے مہربانی مرثیے پڑھیے پر محمد وآل محمد بآواز بلند صلوات، اللہم صلی اللہ۔
جزاک اللہ بیٹا محمد، جزاک اللہ، بہت اچھا پڑھا تم نے۔ مرثیے سے پہلے ایک علی اکبر علیہ السلام کی چھوٹی سی خطا ہے، بآواز بلند صلوات پڑھیں.
اللہم صلی علی محمد وعلی محمد.
سب لوگ فقط دیدے تر دیکھ رہے ہیں، مولا میری آنکھوں میں گوہر دیکھ رہے ہیں، مولا میری آنکھوں میں گوہر دیکھ رہے ہیں. بے نور نہ ہو جائے کہیں ان کی نگاہیں، اکبر کی طرف شوخ خمر دیکھ رہے ہیں. رخصت کیا حسین نے کڑیل جوان کو، رخصت کیا حسین نے کڑیل جوان کو، حسرت بھری نظر سے مگر دیکھ رہے ہیں. شاید یہ سوچتے ہیں کیسے اٹھائیں گے، شاید یہ سوچتے ہیں کیسے اٹھائیں گے. شبیر سوئے لاشے پسر دیکھ رہے ہیں، شبیر سوئے لاشے پسر دیکھ رہے ہیں، مولا میری آنکھوں میں گوہر دیکھ رہے ہیں. درود بھیجو محمد آئے. شہید سے کوئی شمشیر کا مزہ پوچھے، مریض سے کوئی اسیر کا مزہ پوچھے، اسیر سے کوئی زنجیر کا مزہ پوچھے، یتیم سے کوئی دلگیر کا، یتیم سے کوئی دلگیر کا مزہ پوچھے. ہر ایک پہ گزرا زمانے میں رنج و غم ہے سہانا عابد بیمار سا، سہانا عابد بیمار سا علام ہے. شہید ہوتے ہوئے باپ کو پسر دیکھے، انی پہ نیزے کی ہے سرے پدر دیکھے. جوان بھائی کا نکلا ہوا جگر دیکھے، پھوپھی کو آنکھوں سے بلوے میں ننگے سر دیکھے. کسی نبی پہ نہ اس طرح کے علم گزرے، جو اس مریض پہ ہر طرح کے، جو اس مریض پہ ہر طرح کے ستم گزرے. شہید تپ میں وہ کانٹوں پہ چلنا عابد کا، پہن کے بیڑیاں ہر ایک قدم پر گر پڑنا، وہ ظلم و جور و ستم، وہ حرم کا شور و بکا، وہ جس میں لاغرے ای عابد، وہ دھوپ وہ درا، سوائے شکر خدا کچھ نہ کہتے تھے سجاد، دعائے امت عظیم میں رہے، دعائے امت عظیم میں رہتے تھے سجاد، پھر آیا کانٹوں پر سجاد کو برہنہ پا، نبی کے کنبے کو بلوے میں لے گئے آدھا، جلایا خیمہ ناموں سے سید زیجا، پھر آ کے بلوے میں زندہ میں قید کر ڈالا، تماشا دیکھنے سب اہل شام آتے تھے، حیا سے اہل حرم گردنے، حیا سے اہل حرم گردنے جھکاتے تھے، ستم کے بعد ہوا کیسے جو چھٹکارا، لئیں سے باپ کا سر اس یتیم نے مانگا، سرے حسین خزانے سے ہند نے بھجوایا، سوار اونٹوں پر کنبا ہوا پیمبر کا، لحد میں لاشیں غریباں کی ہائے دھرنے چلے، میں بطول کو پیوند خاک، میں بطول کو پیوند خاک کرنے چلے، جو پہنچے کربو بلا عابد اسیر بلا، پدر کو دے کے کفن خاک میں رکھا لاشا، لپٹ کے خبر سے چلائے یوں کہ اے بابا، وطن کو جاتا ہوں لو آخری میرا مجرا، وطن سے آیا تھا کس شان سے یہاں ہے، لٹا کے گھر کو میں جاتا ہوں نی، لٹا کے گھر کو میں جاتا ہوں نی، مجا ہے لکھا ہے یوں کہ وطن آئے جب شہ والا، پدر کی یاد میں ہر وقت کرتے تھے نالا، نظر جو آتا تھا پانی تو روتے تھے مولا، ہمیشہ آنکھوں میں پھرتا تھا دشت کرب و بلا، پدر کے بعد بھی راحت ملی نہ عابد کو، دوبارہ قید کیا اس غریب، دوبارہ قید کیا اس غریب زادے کو، وطن سے لے گئے پھر قید کر کے بانی شر، ہوئی بھتیجے کے ہمراہ زینب مزتر، قریب شام جو پہنچے وہ دونوں نوحہ گر، لگایا بیلچا زینب کی پشت کے اوپر، سفر میں زینب بے کس سے چھٹ گئے سجاد، دیار شام میں پھرا کے لوٹ، دیار شام میں پھرا کے لوٹ گئے سجاد، پھپھی کو سونپ کے جنگل میں سید والا مدینے میں ہوا داخل وہ بے کس و تنہا ولید شام کے حاکم نے زہر بھجوایا وہ سم کے کھاتے ہی عابد نے کی جہاں سے خزا فلک پہ ہو رو ملک عرش کو ہلانے لگے زمین میں جن و بشر سر پہ خاک زمین پہ جن و بشر سر پہ خاک اڑانے لگے محب و داغے علم دل پہ دھر گئے سجاد جو کھایا زہر تو صد حیف مر گئے سجاد نبی کی آل کو بے آس کر گئے سجاد یتیم ہو گئے باخر گزر گئے سجاد سر اپنا پیٹے مرخص مصطفیٰ نکلے کلیجہ تھام کے کیوں کرنا کلیجہ تھام کے کیوں کرنا فاطمہ نکلے خدا کے عرش کا تارا گزر گیا لوگو غضب شاہ ہمارا گزر گیا لوگو وہ بے کسوں کا سہارا گزر گیا لوگو حسن حسین کا پیارا گزر گیا لوگو مدینہ لٹ گیا یا مصطفیٰ دہائی ہے نجف اجڑ گئے یا مرتضیٰ نجف اجڑ گئے یا مرتضیٰ مدینہ لٹ گیا یا مصطفیٰ دہائی ہے نجف اجڑ گیا یا مرتضیٰ نجف اجڑ گیا یا مرتضیٰ دہائی ہے اللہ لعنت اللہ علی قوم الظالمین
ماشاء اللہ جزاک اللہ حیدر بھائی جزاک اللہ جزاک اللہ جزاک اللہ ناظرین صلوات محمد و آل محمد اس سے پہلے کہ میں آج کے اسپیکر کو دعوت کلام آج کے بیان کے لیے before I invite the speaker for this afternoon, let me take this opportunity to request you all to recite Surah Fatiha for the following marhumeens. Mirza Riyasat Ali Beg, Kazim Begum, Badrunisa Begum, Sayyid Jafar Hussain Razvi, Sayyid Latif Hassan Abidi, Sayyida Narjis Khatun, Sayyida Fatima Uzma, Sayyid Iftikhar Hassan Abidi, Hadi Ali Beg, Mehdi Ali Beg, Askari Ali Beg, Asghar Ali Beg, Sayyid Nasir Hussain Farshori, Sayyida Hashmat Nisa Begum, Manzoor Hussain Beg, Sayyid Mustafa Abbas Razvi, Sayyida Zahra Razvi, Yusuf Hassan Abidi, Rabab Yusuf, Sayyida Kausar Bano, Mirza Sadiq Ali, and all other marhumin muminat. Please also include ہمارے اجاز شیخ صاحب جو کل جس کا انتقال ہوا اور تمام مرحومین جو حال میں اس کرونا کا شکار بنے ہیں اور ہمارے عباس بھائی کو نہیں بھولیے گا ضرور یاد رکھیے گا عباس حسین بھائی اور تمام دیگر مرحومین جو بھی حال ہی میں انتقال فرما گئے ان سب کے لیے سورۃ المبارک الفاتحہ بسم اللہ I would now like to request my son Abbas Farshori to start the lecture for this afternoon. But Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa az baland salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa
Bismillah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم
YouTube लिंक पे आप सुन सकते हैं, लेक्चर शुरू हो गया है।
الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا مولانا حبيب الله العالمين أبو القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على القوم الظالمين من الأولين والآخرين. أما بعد، صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله، صلى الله عليك يا ابن رسول الله، يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة ويا عبرة لكل مؤمن ومؤمنات، غريب مظلوم كربلاء. فيا ليتني يا ليتني كنا معكم سادتي فنفوز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد، قال الله الحكيم في محكم كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعجل فرجهم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to all of the believers and to the Imam of our time, inshallah. I regret, I wish, if only. We as human beings often use words like this, and we say it to represent when we are in a state of regret. If only I was there when that happened, if only I was available for this. I wish we could have done this, but we couldn't. Many times when we are in the state of regret, we feel this feeling of remorse that we've missed out on something which was important, or we have missed something of value. And I wish I got that. But regret is powerful. Regret can harm a person's entire life. One moment can cause an amount of regret which can paralyze a life from any happiness. And to live a life of regret is no way to live a life of happiness. But it happens. When you speak to people who are on their deathbed or who are close to death, many times they articulate the regrets they have in life, the things which they missed on, those opportunities and those chances for success which they didn't take. And it all comes back to them when they're in their final moments facing death. And it's as if they see their entire life before them and they see a life of regret. Now, for me and for you, this is not a thing which we want to experience. And for as long as we are alive, we want to live the kind of life where we don't have those kind of regrets, where we feel like a life has been wasted. But it is a problem that if I am suffering from an issue now that I have not solved in time of my death, like if I haven't succeeded until that time comes, then this whole life could be khasra. Khasra meaning regrets, this whole life. It could be nadama. It could be, as the Quran mentions, something which you wish you hadn't done, you wish you had exchanged, but didn't have the chance. And that's the parable of this life. In today's discussion, we're very much interested in how do we live a life where when that final moment comes, I can say with confidence, I don't regret the way I lived. I don't regret it. We don't want to have that feeling which we taste in morsels now. We don't want to be enveloped by it when we leave this dunya. But in order to have that feeling of not having regret, we must know, where does regret come from? What is it? What are its causes? How have the Imams spoken to us about regret? and when we shouldn't have it, in order to know practically what do I need to do to make sure that I don't suffer from this feeling later on. The heart of this lecture really is when we look at 4 things which the Imams have taught us, which most people regret in their lives. If we go through the ahadith and the narrations and the verses of Quran, these 4 things keep coming up again and again and again, as if it's a reminder to humanity, don't do these 4 things. But in order to look at what those 4 things are, to avoid them, we need to ask certain questions. First of all, we need to know, like, what is this regret? What does Quran say about it? What's the definition of this thing? Well, how is it caused? And how do I escape from it? When is regret good? When is regret bad? And only then can we understand and appreciate those 4 pieces of advice from the Imams about 4 common things human beings suffer regret from. So that's our discussion. We want to know, what is regret? Where does it come from? How is it defined? What are these 4 gems for us? And how can we use them to live a life of positivity and not of sadness, inshallah? That's our discussion. If inshallah you are with me from your homes and wherever you are, and if I have your motivation, inshallah, and if I'm able to serve you, please salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Now then, this idea of regret is known in the Quran as nadama and sometimes as khasra. And we see this language coming up quite a lot in the Quran, where we're saying things like, ya laytani, if only. Lawla, if only it had been like this. Ya waylati, woe be to me that I did not do these things. Lawkana, if I didn't do these things. It comes up a lot where people in the Quran are referred who missed out on certain actions. It seems like regret from Quran is when a person had something of value, they miss it, and they only realize they missed it after they lost that thing. For example, the story of Habil and Qabil, in which after Qabil has killed his son Habil and he's lying on the ground, what verse of Quran is revealed about this moment? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. فَبَعَثَ اللَّهُ غَرَابًا يَبْحَثُ فِي الْأَرْضِ لِيَرِيدُ كَيْفَ يُوَارِي سَوْءَةَ أَخِي. That when Allah Azza wa Jal saw this moment, فَبَعَثَ اللَّهُ غَرَابًا, he sent a crow. يَبْحَثُ فِي الْأَرْضِ, and the crow landed on the earth and started searching there, laying its beak and its wing upon the ground. فِي الْأَرْضِ لِيَرِيهِ. And then now Qabil is thinking, كَيْفَ يُوَارِي سَوْءَةَ أَخِي. He's thinking, how will I hide the body of my brother when Allah has sent a crow to bury its own being? قَالَ يَا وَيْلَتِي. He says, woe be to me. أَعْجَزْتُ أن أكون مثل هذا الغراب فأواري سوءة أخي. That I must see the example of this crow bearing its good, and I am not able to hide the body of my brother. Not just the body, سواء أخي. Sawa here means the naked body of my brother, because of course back then when they were kharij from heaven, there was no clothing. And he's thinking, now he sees, I've done something wrong. Ya waylati, woe be to me that I suffered from an action which I do not even know how to redress now. فَأَصْبَحُوا مِنَ النَّادِمِينَ. And then he became one of the regretful. مِنَ النَّادِمِينَ. That's the first time a person experienced regret in a way that they are called min ashab al-nadimin. Because now Qabil regrets what he has done. He regrets that now he must do something about what he did before, that he's missed out on something. And Tabrasi explains it when giving the tafsir of this verse, that when he says, Ya waylati, woe be to me, what he really means is, I have lost my innocence with Allah. Woe be to me that I am deprived of something like this. My innocence is gone. And that regret which he felt only came because he missed out on something. He regretted from something which he only appreciated the value of later, which was what? The action of obeying Allah, of maintaining your innocence, of not falling into sin, and in this case of not killing an innocent person. And it took a parable this powerful to remind him and to give him that regret. But when does he get the regret? Once it's too late. The moment has gone. Another example from Quran about how people experience regret when they realize something once it's past. The example of the Qawm of Thamud. Nabi Saleh has a community. The Qawm of Thamud is an ancient Qawm situated somewhere between Hijaz and Syria, somewhere north. And as you know, because that community fought and rebelled and did Tughyan against Nabi Salih, they were punished. The ground erupted underneath them. And in fact, when our Holy Prophet is visiting Syria, he sees the remains of this ancient community and he ponders upon them, and the verses are revealed. Salih speaks to the people. He's trying to guide them and give them advice. He says, worship Allah, obey Allah, follow through on the proofs which have been given to you. And as a gift from the Almighty, we give to you a she-camel. We give this to you. When this moment happens, the people of Thamud, they try to rise against him. قَالَ هَذِهِ, he says this right here, this she-camel, نَاقَةُ اللَّهُ شِرْبٌ, when she drinks, وَلَكُمْ شِرْبُ, you will drink. يَوْمَ الْمَعْلُومِ, on the day which is known to you. Whenever you need to drink, when she is thirsty, she'll find an area, so just follow her. So, شِرْبٌ لَكُمْ شِرْبُ. وَلَا تَمَسُّوهَا بِسُوءٍ, and don't harm her. So I'm giving you this she-camel, don't harm her. فَيَأْخُذُكُمْ عَذَابٌ يَوْمٍ عَظِيمٍ, because then you will feel a sincere punishment on a terrible day. That's his entire advice. Take this she-camel, I'm leaving. It will guide you towards water, towards sustenance, on a known time every day. وَلَا تَمَسُّوا بِسُوءٍ, just don't harm it. فَأَقَبُوهَا, but they did. They hamstrung the she-camel, they harmed it. فَأَصْبَحُوا نَادِمِينَ, and then they became regretful. Then they had this nadama. They became just like Qabil was min ashab al-nadimin, they are min nadimin, same thing. Why? فَأَخَذْهُمْ عَذَابٌ إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ, because they received the punishment then. And they saw the sign of Allah. وَمَا كَانَ أَكْثَرُهُمْ مُؤْمِنِينَ. Very, very, very few people were able to learn from this at the time. But the majority of them were punished. فَأَصْبَحُوا نَادِمِينَ. But why? Why is it that they were the ones who regretted? Because after they killed the she-camel, they then realized the punishment's coming towards them. But they realized too late. That's called nadama. When you lose something which you could have done, but you realize after it's already done. Now, sometimes we read in the Quran, we can be regretful just like this. Once we realize what we have missed after we've lost it. Other times, Allah is reminding us to have regrets, to realize what you have missed out on. There's a really beautiful example of this where we are told when we should be having regret from Surah Yasin. In Surah Yasin, which you heard just beautifully earlier, we have this very beautiful parable which begins like this. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَجَاءَ مِنْ أَقْصَى الْمَدِينَةِ, and they came from one of the furthest cities, Medina, رَجُلٌ يَسْعَى, a man running. قال, he says, يَا قَوْمِ اتَّبِعُوا الْمُرْسَلِينَ, oh my community, follow the messenger. Now, this verse was revealed in honor, the narration says, about Habib al-Najjar, who lived in a cave. And when he learned of the prophets, the Anbiya being sent, he ran out, he was guided himself, and he tried to guide the rest of the people. In fact, this verse actually is very closely linked to Ali ibn Abi Talib. In fact, when we read about the Holy Prophet saying, who is Sabiqun, who is the first person to follow me, who followed me within a heartbeat, he says Ali. Ali, who ran out from the community to guide people, saying, قَالَ اتَّبِعُوا الْمُرْسَلِينَ, saying, guide people, follow the messengers. In any case, Habib al-Najjar runs from his cave, saying to the people, اتَّبِعُوا الْمُرْسَلِينَ, اتَّبِعُوا مَنْ لَوْ يَسْأَلُكُمْ أَجْرًا, follow the one who doesn't want anything from you, no ajr. وَهُمْ مُحْتَدُونَ, and he's guided. So you have nothing to lose. He has guidance and he wants nothing from you. If anything, the only time we hear a prophet wanting something about this is قُلْ لَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ أَجْرًا إِلَّا الْمَوَدَّةَ فِي الْقُرْبَى, except love for the Holy Family. But that doesn't even come up here. All that comes up is just follow him, he's on guidance. وَمَا لِيَ لَعْبُدُ الَّذِي فَتَرَنِي وَإِلَيْهِ تُرْجَعُونَ. And he's saying, why will I not follow them when I know that I'm going to be returned back to Allah Azza wa Jal? Why would you not follow them? أَأَتَّخِذُوا, should I take somebody else مِن دُونِهِ آلِهَةً, instead of Allah? إِن يُرِدْنِي الرَّحْمَنُ بِضُرِّ لَا تُغْنِي عَنِّي شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون. Shall I take some other being that when Allah the Rahman sends me punishment, they will not save me, they will not help me, they will have nothing for me? So why will I go to a different Lord? Why will I go to someone other than Allah? إِنِّي إِذًا لَفِي ضَلَالٍ مُبِينٍ. Certainly I would be in a great manifest error. إِنِّي آمَنْتُ بِرَبِّكُمْ فَاسْمَعُونَ. So I have believed in your Lord, I believe in Allah, so listen to me, obey me. Now, while Habib al-Najjar is saying these things, Habib, they say that the enemy around him, they start stoning his body. They're not listening to him. And in this state of saying to them, Inni amantu bi rabbikum fasma'un, listen to me, indeed I've believed, listen to me, they don't listen to him, they kill him, they slaughter him. At that moment, he is taken up to heaven and he is told, قِيلَ ادْخُلِ الْجَنَّةِ, enter into Jannah. And that's when he looks back at his people who are not able to enter Jannah and he says, قَالَ يَا لَيْتَ قَوْمِي يَعْلَمُونَ. I wish my people had known. When does he have this regret? When he's told, قِيلَ ادْخُلِ الْجَنَّةِ, come to Jannah, then have this regret. I wish they were able to come on this path. Abu Abdullah is very much like this. When he is speaking to the people on the day of Karbala, trying to guide them and they're not listening, he feels bad for them of what they are missing out on, the pleasure of Allah. But in this case, Habib, he's taken up towards heaven. Some narrations say he dies, some say that he's taken up alive. And he says to them, Ya layta qawmi ya'lamun bima ghafara li rabbi wa ja'alani min al-mukramin. If only they knew just how much Allah has forgiven me and made me min al-mukramin, made me close towards him and honored him. If only they knew. وَمَا أَنزَلْنَا عَلَى قَوْمِهِ مِن بَعْدِهِ مِن جُنْدٍ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ وَمَا كُنَّا مُنزِلِينَ. And then after this, Allah did not send down anything, la anzal, no revelation towards them. وَمَا كُنَّا مُنزِلِينَ, because he wasn't going to. They had lost their chance. They missed their opportunity when they killed Habib like this. So what happened next? إِن كَانَتْ إِلَّا صَيْحَةٌ وَاحِدَةً فَإِذَا هُمْ خَامِدُونَ. They were just given one shout, wahid. And then they were extinguished after that. So instead of being given more revelation for their punishment, they were destroyed. And that's when Allah sees the regret in them. Ya hasratan ala al-ibad. How regretful for the servants, for the true servants who were sent by Allah. Ma ya'tihim rasulun illa kanu bihi yastahzi'un. That there was not a single messenger who was sent to the people that they didn't ridicule, that they didn't try to misguide, or they didn't try to ignore. There wasn't one who was sent who didn't feel this. Ya hasratan ala al-ibad. How regretful, how a source of remorse is this for the people who were on the path. But the few who were sent were not treated properly by the people. This parable in Surah Yasin, which by the way we always listen to Surah Yasin, is an example for all of us to not have the regret, to not have this regret in our lives of a prophet who's been sent to us, a book, a Quran, Ahl al-Bayt. They've all been sent to us, and yet we don't appreciate them. Here's a very extreme example. But the time when a person feels most regretful, according to the narrations and according to the verse of Quran, is on the Day of Judgment. See, we defined regret as when you've lost something valuable, but you only realize after you've lost it. For most people, this moment happens after they have died. Not on the day, not before their death, after their death. And when they're on the Day of Judgment and they see everything which they disbelieved in was actually real. And it's in that moment that they have this regret that, oh, ya laytani, what have I missed out on? This hasra kicks in then. We have this verse of Quran. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This is from Surah 19, verse 39. وَانذِرْهُمْ. Prophet saying, give them news, tell them, warn them. يَوْمَ الْحَسْرَةِ, about the day of regrets, meaning the Day of Judgment. It's called the Day of Regrets. Why? إِذْ قُضِيَ الْأَمْرُ وَهُمْ فِي غَفْلَةٍ وَهُمْ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. And yet they are still in a state of ghafla, state of carelessness, and still they don't believe. But warn them, وَانذِرْهُمْ يَوْمَ الْخَسْرَةِ, the day of khasra, the day of regret. It's coming. And the reason why they regret is because they look back at their entire life in this dunya and they regret the life. They wish they just did better. Another verse of Quran say, وَقَالَ الَّذِينَ اتَّبَعُوا لَوْ أَنَّ لَنَا كَرَّةً فَنَتَبَرَّ مِنْهُ كَمَا تَبَرُّهُ مِنَّا If only, they will say, if only we could go back and live that life again, and we could not do the things which we used to do. They're saying this when they see the punishment which is before them. If only we could go back and live an entire new life. But then when Allah shows them the real a'mal they did, the actual deeds they did, they have hasra, they have regret that, but I did all of those things. No matter what they say, then they did those things. وَمَا هُمْ بِخَارِجِينَ مِنَ النَّارِ, and they enter the hell. Because even if they say they regret, it's too late. Their actions speak for themselves. This warning comes to us while we're still alive to not be like this. And interestingly, the thing which they're regretting most of all, they're actually regretting what they've already done. That's the whole point of regret. It's when you lose control over what's already happened. So many times the people, when they come towards the fires of hell and they come towards all these different things, they ponder and they have the sense of helplessness that if only I had changed it, but now it's just too late. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, those who did kufr, how? يُنْفِقُونَ أَمْوَالَهُمْ لِيَصُدُّوا عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. They use their mind, they use their wealth to guide people away from Allah. فَسَيُنْفِقُونَهَا ثُمَّ تَكُونُ عَلَيْهِمْ حَسْرَةً ثُمَّ يُغْلَبُونَ. These people, that every time they spend their money, the more they spend, the more they increase in their regrets. وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا إِلَىٰ جَهَنَّمَ يُحْشَرُونَ. But because they did this kufr, because they spent their entire money, their entire wealth to misguide the people, they go towards the hellfire. The moment when they see all of this problem is when it's too late. And the day of judgment is known as Yawm al-Khasra, the day of regret, for this very reason. For the reason that they can't change anything. One of my teachers, Sheikh Shumali, he says this point that the greatest punishment in hellfire is not about fire and burning water and all these things. It's not about that. The greatest punishment is regret. The people who are in hell at that time will look back and they will think, I wish that I had not been here. And that feeling alone is the punishment. Everything else is external, but the internal punishment is that knowledge that I made a mistake, and I knew I made a mistake, and I still didn't change. They then, at that time, that's when they confide, they admit, I have regret. I have this nadama. When they see adaba, وَجْعَلْنَا الْأَغْلَالَ فِي الْعَنَاقِ الَّذِي كَفَرُوا. And when they see the punishment and the shackles being put upon them and all of these things, that's when they realize, before all the punishment begins, it's the knowledge that I made a mistake. It's when they see all of these things. وَلَوْ أَنْ لِكُلِّ نَفْسٍ ظَلَمَتْ مَا فِي الْأَرْضِ لَفْتَدَتْ بِهِ. And if every soul which did wrong, which did dhulm, would see what would happen, وَأَسُرُّ نَدَامَةَ لَمَّا رَأُوا الْعَذَابِ. They would have this regret when they see the adab in front of them. But what else they see? وَقُضِيَ بَيْنَهُمْ بِالْقِسْطِ. When they see that I'm going to be treated with justice by Allah. Every action I did, I'm going to see it. وَهُمْ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ. And there will be no dhulm. They will not be oppressed again. They will not be oppressed. They will just experience what they did. That knowledge alone creates for them hasra. So far, to clarify, we had to do this kind of foundational understanding of what is hasra and what is nadama, to understand that regret is when you have something, but you lose it and you realize after you've lost it. Okay? Qabil realizes when? After he's killed Habil. Qawm Thamud realize when? After they've killed the she-camel and are facing their punishment. The Qawm of Habib al-Najjar realize when? They realize when the punishment comes upon them, and Allah says, Ya layta qawmi. They say, Habib says, if only my Qawm would have realized. But all of this takes place at death and after death, especially on Yawm al-Khasra, on the Day of Judgment, when all of us will look back and think, if only I had not done those things, if only I had changed my ways. Question, where does regret come from precisely? Where is regret from? What is the origin of this this thing we are seeking avoidance from. The Holy Prophet Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajum, explains to us that regret comes from this dunya. Inna ashadda an-nasa nadamata yawm al-qiyamah. The person on the day of judgment who will be the most regretful, rajulu ba'a al-akhirah bidunya ghayra, the one who sells akhirah and tries to buy this dunya, this world. It's in that faulty transaction that all of our regrets come from. He even says, if you spend a life looking at what other people have, your sorrows will increase. If your attention is towards the bounties of others in this dunya, there is only khasra. There is only regret that is going to be happening. The Prophet says to him, in a phrase which another companion says was like the most profitable for him. The Prophet says, all happiness you'll attain in this life is when you get something that you could have missed. Everything which makes you happy is when you could have missed it, but you got it. And all sadness in this world is when you lose something that you just had. It's when you had something and you could have avoided it, but it inflicted upon you that sadness. So Imam Ali alayhi salam then says, in that case, the thing which you should be seeking is akhirah, because you might not get it, but if you get it, you'll be happy with it. And the thing you should be avoiding is that which has already passed before you. So even if you lose this dunya, if you lose the pleasure of the happiness, if you lose all these things, it's past you. You will not regret it because you know that it was not what you were seeking in the first place. But the problem is when we live a life in which we want this dunya, from the expectations of this world and its pleasure comes khasra, comes nadama, comes regret. Moreover, because we live in this life of this world, we soon realize this world wasn't even worth seeking in the first place. When you speak to people who are rich, like dunyawi people, they have money, they have fame, they have access to any kind of pleasure which they wish. How many of them are happy? And how many of them, after they are through the kind of phase of living this dunyawi life, do they look back and do they say it wasn't even worth it? This hedonistic lifestyle of just seeking pleasure again, it wasn't even worth it. The chase wasn't worth it. But because they attain so much value to dunya and dunya became nothing, it means they look at themselves as having no value and they lose self-worth. Because if I judge myself based on this world and I realize this world was a joke, this world was nothing to seek, then I realize in that case, I am nothing. I have become the thing which was worthless in the first place. And a person becomes careless. And it's from the actions taken in that carelessness that you become regretful. Imam Ali alayhi salam says that the fruit of carelessness is regret. The thing which comes from not caring and not being careful and not having consideration is regret. And the fruit of determination, being determined, that's when you have safety. Similarly, our sixth Imam says a very similar thing, but with an addition. He says the thing which causes regret is haste. So either you are careless, you don't care about this dunya, you don't care about anything, you just want to live for the next pleasure, or you are always hasting and running towards chasing this world without thinking about it. And the thing which stops regret, Imam As-Sadiq says, is caution. Determination and caution. Planning, these things stop you making decisions which will lead to regret. But haste and carelessness, when a person's not thinking about Allah or planning in any way for akhirah, just living from this pleasure to that pleasure, that leads to actions which are regret. The honest truth, my dear brothers and sisters, is that regret is something which we cause ourselves. It's our own doing. We are the cause of the things we end up regretting. Whatever I've lost in my life, I did that. That was me. The Holy Prophet says that leaving opportunities is what brings regret. When you had an opportunity, you had a chance to do something, but you didn't. And it's after, when you look back, that you have regret of your own action or inaction. It's yourself. Now, sometimes we hear people say, oh, I regret this action which I did and it was my fault. Famous narration of one of the enemies of Ahlul Bayt, says, I regretted 3 things. And amongst them, says, one of them was the oppression I did to Sirri Zahra sallallahu alayha. It's not enough to just admit you did wrong. If you admit from that moment onwards, everything you do must go back to that admittance, where you change your ways, recognizing your regret. So if someone says that I regret oppression to Ahlul Bayt, they must take some decision after this moment to prove they no longer accept what they did was right. It's not just words. But when some people, for example, in the case of that example, they say, oh, I regret the dhulm I did to Ali Muhammad, but when the time comes to change it, they carrying on taking away the huquq of Ali Muhammad one after the other, that person deserves no forgiveness. But you and I are not in the position of those people. We can stop for a moment, recognize we have done something wrong, and then move forward in recognition of our regret to not be regretful on Yawm al-Khasra, on the Day of Judgment. And that's where we have these 4 pieces of advice from the Imams, of which what are those 4 most likely, most common things which cause regret? This is not said from one narration. I've put together a bunch of different ahadith from here and there, and there seems to be 4 themes which developed of the most likely things people have regret over before they die. What are they? Number 1, the thing which people most regret after they have done it in this dunya is living a life for wealth. Imam Ali alayhi salam says the biggest loser, the one who is the most unsuccessful, is the one who exerts himself to seek the wealth of this world, and he doesn't even achieve it because of the fate of this world. So he leaves this dunya with regret over the dunya, and he enters akhirah with regret over the same decision. He leaves this world with regret and heads to akhirah with the ill consequences of his actions. That person is in the worst position. Why? They spent their whole life seeking pleasure, seeking this world, specifically wealth and money. But this world is hard. This world is difficult. And they didn't even get that. So the thing they set up their whole life to achieve became into dust. And now they face akhirah. The truth is that we many times live quite like this. We live a life which is centered around wealth, whether we know it or not, whether we accept it or not. Here's our condition. All right, you're born in a certain family, and the family does its best for you to try and raise you to attain, success. They pay for you to go to school. Maybe if they're rich, they get you into private school. If they're not rich, well, they pay for you for tuition to get into a good school. If they don't have that, then maybe you go through the normal school system, but they lose their patience with you, urging you study, do your homework, or you'll not be successful. It's the most important thing in your whole life. Get good exams. Fine. You do your GCSEs, you do okay, but you got to do better. So now they pay for even more money for your A-levels. Now you do your A-level examinations. All right, we've got to pay more money now to do the tuition to get you those good grades, because here comes university. Now we're going to try and find a course for you, which will be an investment, but you should just do those subjects, not for the sake of knowledge, not for the sake of beauty, not for the sake of what you are good at, what you're talented at. What course will get you good money? Do that course. Okay, you do a course now which you hate because you want the money. 3 years of torture, or 3 or 4 years of great difficulty, maybe even more years of difficulty, aiming that at the end of it, I'll be okay. No, at the end of it, you have to do a grad school. You have to go to another school to study even more and do a course which is more hours in the day than a person should be working. Why? Because it's okay. I'll do this study now. Later on, I'll be living a life of ease, of religion and all that things. It comes later. But what happens? A person gets the job. Now their whole life is run from their job, where they live, what they do. Whether or not they're religious depends on whether or not their job needs them to be religious. And what happens next? Well, let's just get married now. We've raised enough money, so let's marry someone who has the same amount of money as you, and let's raise a family of children, because that's what our family did. And now that we have children, now we give them more money to raise them higher. We pay for even better schools than we had. We pay for better clothes than we had. We buy better cars, better toys. We buy a bigger house, all because we want to give them the best opportunities than we had. Again, all we're thinking about is money. Now that child grows up, obviously materialistically, because all we have taught the child is, I struggled when I was younger. I didn't have money. Look, here's money. Take it. Go and be happy. That child now lives a life in which being religion is only secondary to being money, to being rich and to having money. That child grows up. Now you, the individual, keeps working and thinks, you know what? I'll work till I can retire, and then I'll be religious because I've retired now. But what happens next? The economy is bad. The child needs money for school. The family, of course, needs money for the household. Your parents need money and need wealth. And you realize that, no, maybe I'll just keep working because that's the system which we're in. Until a person reaches the elderly age where they do retire, they now lose the health, which they wanted to enjoy. They lose the age, which they wanted to cherish. And the children who they raised have their own lives. So now that small gap between ending working and death is when you're simply burning through the money which you earn to do things which you think makes you happy. Now you're on your deathbed, looking back, thinking, I spent an entire life earning money to give myself and my children a good life. But here I am, without anything to leave behind, without anything for my children to inherit, facing the qabr, going towards Allah. So what was it all for? What was the point of all that investment if all of the returns were reinvested into money and it never came out towards religiosity? I didn't go to ziyarah as much as I should have. I didn't spend in charity as much as I should have. I did the bare minimum the deen requires of me. I lived a life which was purely for wealth. That person in that moment only has regret. And this cycle keeps on spinning of people living and dying for the sake of this dunya. So the first thing, the main thing, or the most important thing, which the Imam says the biggest loser is the one who lives their life for this dunya, but they don't even get it. And now they have the regret of loss and of neglect of akhirah. Okay. The second thing of the four, which people regret the most, according to the frequency of it coming up from Ahlul Bayt, is missed time and opportunity. When I did a survey of people actually on their deathbed, this one came up a lot, that I wish I used my time better. I wish I didn't waste time. I didn't do israf of the time that I had. Ahlul Bayt are always reminding us, use your time now. Use it. Don't waste the opportunity you have been given. There's one moment, by the way, where Imam Ali alayhi salam, he's giving a speech. He speaks, he just stops and looks at people and he says to them, Al-an, al-an. Now is the time. Al-an, al-an, qabla al-nadam. Now, before you have regret. What's he talking about? What does he mean? وَمِنْ قَبْلِ أَن تَقُولُوا نَفْسَ يَا حَسْرَتِي عَلَى مَا فَرَتْهُ فِي جَنْبِ اللَّهِ. Stop now, before you have that regret where you say, the verse of Quran which says, if only I did not have this neglect where I missed out on being close to Allah. Al-an, qabla al-nadam. Now, he says to them, before you regret, do those actions now. Do that ibadah, do that prayer. Read up on this issue, read Quran, do the ibadah, do that khidmah, that service to humanity. Do all these things now while you have the time. Take advantage of now. Because, Imam says, before that regret comes where you say, if only I did it then. Start that path. But once you start the path, once you're on it, don't get off it. Stay on that path. Imam Ali alayhi salam says, وَإِنَّ شَرَاعِ الدِّينِ وَاحِدٍ. There is one path towards, on this path. Once you're on this path, stay on it. Then he says, if you stop, if you stop on this path, you will become regretful. If you stop praying, if you stop wearing the clothing that we should be, if we stop acting, if we stop respecting our parents, if we stop once we started, we'll fall off it. For deen is like a stream. I'm saying this part. Deen is like a stream. It's constantly flowing towards Allah. There is no stagnancy or instability. You're always moving towards Him. The moment you stop and stop caring about this faith, you fall off this stream. You're no longer going forward, you're out of it. Imam says you will regret this. Don't stop once you're on this path. He says, know that this world, this dunya, is a place of difficulty, it's a place of trial. So you can't afford to be idle. Imam Ali says this, he says you can't afford it. Because the moment you are stopping and you are being idle, you will regret this on the day of judgment. I'm telling you. So this advice of the Imam is use now. What's wrong with now? Really, what's wrong with this moment to do the things which I know that I should be doing? There's nothing. Al-an. This moment is when I have the opportunity. The day of hope, Imam Ali says, is the day in which you're able to serve Allah. These are the days of hope. Things will change. Political climates and pandemics and all those things will keep coming and going. But every day that you have the chance to serve Allah and you're not, is a day of regret. And of course, we don't want to feel this. So that's the second. The second thing which people often regret is missed time and opportunity. What's wrong with now? All right. Number 3, the third thing which people often regret as they're approaching death is that which they did in anger. Those things done in anger, which were said in anger, which were said in rage, in fact, become a source of great regret later on in your life. Imam Ali alayhi salam says, Al-hiddatu, hiddatu is like rage, not just anger, rage. Al-hiddatu min al-majnoon, or min al-junoon. It's like being crazy, like being mad. Why? لِأَنَّ صَاحِبَهَا يَنْدَمُ. Because later on, you feel regret after you have rage. Lam yandamu. If you don't have this regret after you feel angry, فَجُنُونُهُ مُسْتَحْكِمٌ. Then that junoon, that madness has become part of you. In the same way, if you've ever seen someone, by the way, if you've seen someone who's mad in anger, they can't even control themselves sometimes. What they're saying, they have no control. The way their body's moving. Even if you look at someone dead in the eye while they're angry, you don't even see them. You see something, a different person entirely. And so the words which come out, you forgive them for it because it's not them. Hoping that once the anger has passed, they can say, by the way, I lost my temper. I'm sorry, and let's make amends, because they realize they lost the temper. Imam is saying sometimes people don't even have that feeling of knowing they lost their temper. They don't have that. And that's just what regret is. Regret is when it becomes part of who you are. If you don't have regret, then just like madness is part of the angry person, madness is part of you. Because you no longer regret when you become angry. In that case, it's much better to forgive someone. If you have become angry and you realize, I lost my temper, forgive them. If you don't forgive them, you'll be in a state of regret for your whole life. When Imam Ali alayhi salam gives that famous letter to Malik al-Ashtar, he writes in there that I'm sending you now to represent me and to lead the people. And remember, do not fight against Allah, follow Allah, obey Allah. For you cannot do anything without Allah's mercy. You can do nothing without it. And so he says, Malik, if you forgive someone or you are merciful to them, don't regret this. Don't act hastily in anger. Forgive them. And don't feel regret after you forgive them. This is the right thing to do. 4, remember how Allah has taken favor upon you when you take favor upon the people who you are in control of. He says, do not say that just because you are in power, you have authority over them. For Allah has authority over both of you. The main point here is, don't regret it. When you have the chance to forgive someone, take it. Forgive them. Don't live a lifetime where one moment of anger killed a relationship or killed a friendship. You said something in anger, it happens. It happened once. But don't live a whole life where you don't go back and correct that moment, that regret. Our 6th Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, qala, Musliman bay'atu nadamatin. The Muslim who makes amends when they have regrets. When they do this, nadamatil aqal Allah azza wa jal asratu yawm al-qiyamah. Allah will forgive many of their sins associated to this just because they said sorry to the other person. All they had to do was say, I regretted something with you and I apologize, or allow somebody to do this to you, like forgive them if they apologize to you, or if they apologize before to you and only now you forgive them, fine, but at least you have that forgiveness, because Imam says otherwise you will have regret on the day of judgment, which Allah will not forgive. He'll not forgive the thing which you have regret for. It's so much easier to forgive someone than to live a life of regret. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You might be thinking, like, if while I'm speaking, you're thinking, I have this problem with this person, and it's true, I haven't really forgiven them, they haven't forgiven me, we just don't speak anymore. If that's true, and you think even the idea of making amends with them seems painful, it's true. It is hard to say sorry sometimes. And it's hard to forgive somebody once they have said sorry if you still have that feeling. But what's harder is punishing them with silence and then regretting it at the end of the day. Imam says this. Our 5th Imam alayhi salam says, to regret when you forgive someone and feel pain, even if you do, that pain is less than the pain you'll feel if you punish them. because you can't take that back. And so it's so much easier and preferable, and the Imams would prefer it to us to forgive. They'd actually rather that we don't even lose our temper in the first place. That's the solution to all these problems. The best thing, as our Sixth Imam says, is the best one is the one who restrains their tongue when they're in anger. They're in the best situation. That's the ideal. But if you do become angry and you say something which you regret, you have two options. Either make amends with that person or don't. If you don't, you live a life of regret. We know this, because at the end of the day, whether you like it or not, you will regret that one moment which you allowed to become a lifetime of anger. And if you do forgive them, but it feels hard and it hurts you while you do it, Imam al-Baqir says that's fine. He promises you that the feeling of not doing that will hurt you much more. So forgive them. That's the third thing of the four, which people regret the most, when they do something out of anger and they didn't correct it with forgiveness. All right. The fourth thing which people in their lifetime, at the end of their life, regret terribly is when they do dhulm to somebody, oppression. To the extent that the Prophet says, "Adh-dhulmu nadama," dhulm is regret. Oppression is regret. Every time you oppress somebody in even the most minor form or what seems to be minor, it will become a cause of regret later on. Imam Ali alayhi salam says, the one who does dhulm, they do dhulm today, but they bite their hands in regret tomorrow for this one action of oppression. Because people have hukuk, people have rights. And we cannot expect to offend them and to hurt them and expect nothing to happen to us. No, haqqun nas, the right of the people, always exists in public actions and actions of society. Who are we to go through life offending people, oppressing them, doing dhulm to them, and expecting that we'll feel okay? No, you will feel regret over the dhulm you do, because we're people. Imam Sadiq says, the one who has the most regret, inna a'dama an-nasa yawm al-qiyamah bihasra, one has the most hasra on the day of judgment, man wasfa al-adla thumma khafahu ila al-ghayri. They spoke about justice, they spoke about adl, but in their actions, they didn't follow it. They have the most regrets on the day of Qiyamah. I listened to many majalis about dhulm. I shared loads of WhatsApp videos about dhulm. I said, yeah, we're very upset about what's happening in the world. But when it came to the actions I actually can do, I was an oppressor. And that feeling that we have is what reverses on us and crushes us with regret, a life of regret. And sometimes we're not just oppressing others, we're doing dhulm to ourselves, and we don't care. This line we always keep saying in dua, dhalamtu nafsi, I've oppressed myself. We say it all the time. Have you asked yourself, what is the point of saying this line if you don't allow it to have an effect in you? Okay, dhalamtu nafsi, I've oppressed myself, I understand. And I know how. Dua Kumail goes through all the reasons where we make mistakes. I get the mistakes. So now, between this Thursday and next Thursday, I have the chance to change something. So when next Thursday comes around, I can say that next time I say dhalamtu nafsi, I'm a different person. I've changed something. But imagine going through a whole lifetime of committing sins upon a person, not even changing them, looking back and thinking, I truly did oppress myself. Because I knew I was doing wrong, but I didn't do anything about it. Dhalamtu nafsi. I oppressed myself. And I never seriously changed myself. Little things, but I never took the effort to actually reform myself. When he says the one who is the most regretful on the day of judgment is the one who gains wealth by disobeying Allah. So they oppressed themselves. They may have got wealth, but they disobeyed Allah. And then that same wealth which they attained through haram, they see others getting through halal. That same wealth of theirs, that person uses it for heaven, whereas that same wealth becomes a source of hell for you. All because you oppressed yourself by not using your wealth for the sake of Allah, or gaining it by halal risk, for example. Dhalamtu nafsi. This fourth reason is the one which actually hurts the most, that it's not really about other people, it's not about being angry with people or about missing chance to serve them. It's about me. I didn't become what I could have became. I didn't even reach my potential. I was born with so much potential to be so much. But because I didn't try, because I was careless, or because I was just hasty running towards dunya without thinking, I didn't achieve it. We, the followers of Ali Muhammad, we have an added responsibility to follow these words because it's our Imam speaking to us. Billions of people will feel the regret of being on a deathbed and looking back and wishing they did things differently. But not all of them have Ali Muhammad to themselves. And we should actually regret how little we use Ahlul Bayt in our day-to-day lives. Even these hadith I mentioned just now, we should regret not knowing more about the words and speech of Ali Muhammad. It's all there for us. Now, we know this because even at the time, people regretted it when Ahlul Bayt stopped speaking at the time. That's why we regret now when we can stop reading the words of Ahlul Bayt. In Shiqshaqiyya, when the Imam is speaking that famous khutbah, where he just speaks on a level, to the people, Ibn Abbas says that I always regretted that I interrupted Ali when he spoke on that day, because I interrupted him and I regret what he could have said more. So Ibn Abbas, who's living in the time of the Imam, is regretting the Imam not speaking more. Another example, Khutbatul Gharra, famous khutbah, in which Hammam bin Shurair says to the Imam, please tell me some qualities about the muttaqeen. And the Imam says to him, I know that you cannot handle what I'm about to say. Hammam says, no, speak. While Imam is speaking, going through 1, 2, 3, 4, 100, 110 features of who the muttaqi are, going through them in a fiery sequence of eloquency and oratory, they turn around and they see that Hammam's body is shivering. And when they turn once more, they hear a cry and they see that in that state of ecstasy from the knowledge he is hearing, his soul has left his body. Imam turns to him and says to him with some regret that look at the way that true guidance, true admonition affects the one whose heart is soft. But the Imam stopped speaking then. Imagine if he spoke more. And more than this, we today, the Qawm of Tashayyu, we don't even have access to much of the words of the Imams because of how many of our libraries have been burnt by the enemies. It's a source of great regret for us. I wish I had more. I wish I had more access to the Imams today. All of you know the name of Sheikh Tusi. Sheikh Tusi, who is one of the great scholars that we have. 2 of our great canonical books come from him. Al-Tahdhib and Al-Istibsar. Of the 4, 2 are from Sheikh Tusi, great scholar. And if anyone asks you, what is his most important quality, Sheikh Tusi would say that he is the founder of the Hawza. The 1,000-year-old Hawza of Najaf al-Ashraf goes back to him and his work in Najaf. But he's not from Najaf, he's from Baghdad. He spent 40 years in Baghdad. Why did he go to Najaf? Because during the time when he was in Baghdad, because of the conflict between the Wahhabis against, Wahhabis is a contemporary term, the enemies of Ahlul Bayt from Ahl Sunnah, then they attacked him, they attacked his library and burnt it down. A scholar of whom 2 of his surviving works are 4 of our most known, wrote a 5th and more, which were all burnt down, which we have lost out on. We even have the contents pages and the fihrist, the references of who he cited in his books to know that Sheikh Tusi had narrations which no one else had in those books of the words of the Imams burnt down, ashes and embers because of the enemies of Ali Muhammad had hatred for him. So he left to go to Najaf. I ask you, as much as we have which we don't read, we have lost much of the words of Ali Muhammad through politics and through dhulm and oppression to our forefathers and to our ancestors and to the scholars who paved the way for us. We have lost. But we should not have regret, hasra, in the way of the loser. The one who regrets when they are angry or because they missed opportunity or because they did dhulm. Those people, we should not be like them. Because there is a secret to not regretting. There is one thing which always comes up for the Imams telling us, if you don't want to live a life of regret, you don't want those 4 things to affect you, the most important thing you must do is abstain from this dunya, which is easier said than done. It is the hardest thing, but this is the secret. No regret, no remorse for this word, because you never were attached to the word. It never did anything for you. Our 6th Imam says, Zuhud, abstaining from the pleasure of this world, not being attached to physical pleasures and to fame and all those things, is miftahul akhirah. It is the key to akhirah, the immunity towards the fire. When Imam says, when you abandon all those things which preoccupy you with dunya and you replace them with preoccupation for Allah, you will not even regret losing this dunya. You won't even feel that regret at the end of the day, because your attention was towards Allah. Abu Abdullah says, Ya Allah, the person who found you, what did they lose? And the one who lost you, what did they find? What was there for them in this world, in this dunya? There are people, the Imam Ali also explains, that they know this world is tempting, they feel it. But because they also know that the pleasure of Allah is greater than this dunya, it's then that they decide that they don't want to be involved with this world. They don't want to live a life where they're chasing the pleasure of this dunya. They're the ones who don't have that regret. They don't have this hasra. They don't feel it. If it's true what we said earlier, that whatever makes you happy is that which you could have lost but you gained, and whatever makes you sad is that which maybe wouldn't have affected you but it did affect you, then all of sadness comes from dunya and how this world treats you, what it throws at you, the ebb and flow of this world, the chance of dhulm in this world which might hit you. You never know what's coming, but when it gets you, that's sadness. But for someone who's only thinking of akhirah and not concerned with this dunya, even the oppression of this world becomes like a test for Allah, and you transform your reality. What another person regrets about, you do shukr about. And this only comes from the one who lives a life without regret. The final point I want to mention before leaving to all of you is that so far we have covered that you regret something which had value but which you missed out on. Many times the greatest thing which we regret is our lack of proximity to Ahlul Bayt. I wish that I was in Karbala now, for example. I wish I was in Qom. I wish I was in Najaf al-Ashr. I wish I was near Baytullah. I wish I was there, but I wish I could go to Ziyarah, for example, but I can't. And also, we often say things like, I really wish that I was there at Karbala. I would have fought for Abu Abdullah. I would have done all of these things for him. These are very powerful motivations for us to improve today, but they must be done very carefully. Ayatollah Mirza Tabrizi, Malik Tabrizi, has a book called Al-Muraqaba Al-A'mal Al-Sana, the book which is guidance for each month of the year, how you should act. Kul Sana. Fi Bab al-Muharram, in the chapter on Muharram, he says that many times we say things like, if I was there at Karbala, I would have fought alongside the companions, or Kash mein dore Payghambar, if I was there in that time of the Prophet, or in this case of Abu Abdullah, the arrows would have hit me before Abu Abdullah, or I would have given my children before I would see Hazrat Ali Asghar being martyred. I would rather go thirsty myself than the women and children go thirsty. Like, we say these things quite a lot. Agha Tabrizi says, if you believe it, this is very good. Like, if it's true, this is genuinely the truth, then may Abu Abdullah accept you, and may it be that you are with the Siddiqeen, the truthful ones. But is it true? Like, do we really mean that? Because if it was true, then if I was there, I would have fought with you, Abu Abdullah, and I know it for sure. But when sin comes to me in my life now, and I commit that sin, then why am I comparing myself to awliya Allah wa ahibbai, companions of Abu Abdullah, who are the friends of Allah? Why am I like them? What gives me the right to even claim association to them? So Agha Tabrizi says, don't say that unless you really mean it, or you'll become munafiq and a hypocrite. Instead, say, Ya laytani kuntu ma'akum. If I was with you, Ya laytani kuna ma'akum fa'afuza fawzan azim. Then I would have achieved a great sacrifice, a great success, if I was with you. Don't say, if I'm with you, I'm going to give myself before Abbas gives himself. Don't say these things. Even our Nohas and Mercias don't write like this. Just say, if I was there, I would have sought a great reward. Thus. Because there is that famous example of the person who would say all the time, that I wish I was there for Abu Abdullah, Ya Laytani, I wish I was there, I would have done all of this for you, Ya Hussein. He sleeps, he sees Abu Abdullah in a dream. He says to Imam Hussein, I will do all these things for you. An arrow is shot towards him. He ducks down, the arrow passes where he would have been and hits Abu Abdullah. Imam Hussein turns and says to him, don't say you would be with me if your heart is not fully with me like my companions. There are no companions like my companions. Don't regret like that. Say, I wish I was good enough to be there. I wish I was pious enough. I wish I was truthful enough. I wish I was rational enough. I wish I was worthy of being a companion. But don't say I could just be there. Are you really ready to be there? The only person who can speak like this justifiably is the Imam of our time. Our Imam, who also felt regret that he was not there at Karbala, only he can speak like this, and he does. In Ziyara Nahya, he says, Salam. Salam from the one, Al-Mafjuh al-Hazin, the one who is distressed and in a state of huzn and sadness. Imam al-Mahdi speaking to Abu Abdullah. Al-Walih al-Mustaqim. Salam from the one who is distracted in his grief and his submission to you. Salam min law kana ma'aka bit-tufuf. Salam from the one that if I had been there with you, my grandfather Abu Abdullah, on the plains of Karbala, وَلِوِقَاءِ بِنَفْسِهِ حَدَّ السُّيُوفِ, I would have put my body in between your body and the swords. Only Imam can speak like this. وَبَدَلَ حَشَاشَةَ دُونَكَ لِلْحُتُوفِ, and I would have given my last breath before you gave your last breath. وَجَاحَتْ بَيْنَ يَدَيْكَ, and I would have fought between you and your enemies, in between them attacking you. وَنَصْرَكَ عَلَى مَنْ بَعْدِلْ عَلَيْكَ, and any of them who needed you, I would be the one who would be your helper in this moment. وَفِدَاكَ بِرُوحِي وَجَسَدِي وَمَالِي وَوَلَدِي, I would sacrifice myself, my body, my wealth, and my children. Imam can speak like this. وَرُوحِي لِرُوحِكَ الْفِدَاء, and I would give myself for you. I'd sacrifice my soul for you. وَأَحْلِهُ لِأَحْلِكَ الْوِقَاء, and I would give my family as a shield for you. Imam al-Mahdi, Ajal Ta'ala Fajr al-Sharif, he speaks like this. His hasra, his regret, in a positive way, is if I was there with you, I would have done all of these things. But he says later, Allah Azza wa Jal has decreed that I have a different challenge, and instead I will mourn for you day and night. But he still feels that if I was there, I would have given everything for you, Ya Abu Abdullah. We need to become worthy of this level by using the legitimate sadness you have for Abu Abdullah and using it for reform in yourself, so that you live a life which has no regret, because you were never attached to this dunya. Neither are you doing actions which you are wasting time, neither are you doing dhulm, neither are you acting out of anger, and neither is it the case that you are living a life in this world which later you'll regret because you were careless or because you acted in haste. No. Instead, live a life, inshallah, in which we are so much attending our mind towards Abu Abdullah that nothing matters except the pleasure of Allah. We pray, inshallah, that all of us can fulfill the dua when we say, Ya laytani kuna ma'akum sa'adati fanafuza fawzan adhim. Ya Allah, if only we were there with Abu Abdullah on the day of Karbala, we would have that great, great adhim reward. But since we're here, let's live a life, inshallah, of contentment and not of regret. Okay, now whenever we hear the words of the Imam on Mahdi Ajal Ta'ala Sharif speaking quite like this, one does feel sad. One feels regretful that, our Imam of our time is so far from Abu Abdullah in terms of the length of history which has separated them, that he feels sad that he was not there to fight with him. But what about Imam Sajjad? Imam Sajjad, who was there, present, who witnessed everything. What about that Imam? That his entire mind and intention is with Abu Abdullah. But because he's bimar, his body won't allow him to fight for Imam al-Hussein. the feeling of Imam Sajjad where he wants to fight for Abu Abdullah, but he just can't, his body won't allow him, is in itself a great torture for him to feel, a great challenge for him. And there are two moments in particular in which we see how much he wishes he could fight, but he can't. And the first moment is when Abu Abdullah comes to his tent after laying down the body of Abu Fadl Abbas at Furat. And he has just now, using Zulfiqar, buried a small qabr for Ali al-Asghar. So he walks into the tent finally and says, "Take my final salam, O my son." When he says this, Imam Sajjad looks at him and says to him, "Just now I heard you say the words, 'Is there anyone to help me? Is there anyone left to defend the tradition of this family? Why did you speak like this? And where was my brother Ali Akbar to answer you?' When he says about Abdullah, says, 'I have already laid the body of Ali Akbar in the Maqtal.' He says, 'But then where is Abbas? Where is Qasim?' He says, 'No, I have buried all of their bodies. I have left them all upon the sands of Karbala.' Until the point where Imam Sajjad says, 'But I heard the crying voice of Ali al-Asghar. Where is he?' Which Abdullah says, 'Just know that there is only you and me who are males left in this camp.' When he says this line, they say, Imam Sajjad says, 'Zainab, bring me my sword.' And he tries to stand up out of izzah for Abu Abdullah. He says, 'No, sit down.' He says, 'No, I cannot see you so ghareeb where you have no one with you, and I am alive to help you, but I cannot.' They say in this moment, Imam Hussein says, 'No, sit down, my son Ali. You have a great challenge coming towards you. You must be patient. For there will come a time where this deen needs you. I give to you imamat now. The bayat is in your hands.' After this moment, they say he leaves. Imam Sajjad is, of course, still staying in the tent. And then there's one other moment where we see the regret in him. When? It's when Zainab is watching Abu Abdullah lying alone in the Maqtal in Karbala, and she's shimmer walking towards his body. But they said Abu Abdullah says, 'Ya Allah, do not let Zainab see what's about to happen.' So Allah sends a great mist, a wind, to cover the body of Abu Abdullah. So Zainab can't see, but she becomes worried because she can't see. So she runs to and from the camp to the Maqtal, towards Tila Zainabiyah. She can't see. When she goes back to Imam Sajjad, she says, 'Ya Imam, where is my brother? I cannot see him, I cannot hear him.' When she says, Imam Sajjad tries to stand up and says, 'Salamu alaykum ya Abu Abdullah.' He says, 'Zainab, my Zainab, give me a weapon.' Why? Because right now Shimr is sitting on the chest of my father, Abu Abdullah. Where is my sword? Where is my spear?' In that moment, we see the regrets for Imam. Why? He wishes he could be there to help him, but his body is too weak. And so that's why they say Imam Sajjad, al-Madhloom bimar Imam, that while he's traveling from Karbala all the way to Kufa, Kufa to Sham, Sham back to Karbala, he's always feeling this sadness and this grief where he is told, 'How long will you grieve for? How long will it be?' And he says, that Yaqub grieved for Yusuf for decades and decades, and he lost just one Yusuf. I have seen 28 members of my family slaughtered lying. I have buried their bodies in Karbala. Why will I not mourn for them?' They say this is the regret for who? For Imam Sajjad. But I also see this in the personality of Sayyida Sakina. Why? Because this young girl, Sakina Ruqayya, this 4-year-old girl who we think about, who we mourn for, she is always thinking of Abu Abdullah, and when she's not with him, she's wishing, 'I wish I could be with him again.' In fact, in the final moment where they say Abu Abdullah is leaving to go towards the Maqtal, all of you know that his horse stops. And he turns and he sees a 4-year-old girl is hugging the legs of Zuljana, saying, 'Don't take him, don't take him.' When Abu Abdullah lifts her and speaks to her and says to her, 'I'm going towards the Maqtal,' she says, 'But everyone who goes does not return.' And then he says, 'But I must go towards the Maqtal.' When she says this, she says, 'In that case, my father, can you take me back to Medina to be with my family there? For now I am going to be yatim without you. I wish I was in Medina at this time.' So then they say that Abu Abdullah holds her, he hugs her. He sees this girl doesn't want to be in this state of suffering, but this is the The expectation, this is the test of Allah. He holds her head upon his body. He calms her, he lets her sleep. And in her sleep, she wakes up suddenly and says, Ya Aba Abdullah, leave, go from here, my father. He says, just now you were saying, I wish to be with you. Now you're saying, leave, why? She says, and just now in my dream, I saw your mother Zahra. She was saying, Sakina, let Hussein go, for we are waiting for him. Let him come to me. Let him come to us. When he says this, Sakina wakes up and says, go, my father, go. And the next time she sees him is when she sees him in her own dream. When? On that night in the Zindan. During the day, she had seen birds flying from the Zindan and going towards the home. She would say, Zainab, my Ummi Zainab, why can the birds fly towards their nest, but we cannot go towards Medina? I wish I was there in my home. And it's in that night, we're in that dream, that young girl, as she sleeps, she sees her father and she says to him, my father, where were you when we needed you? Where were you when we were asking for you? Oh, my father, I wish to be with you. And in this dream about that says, come to me, Sakina, come to me, hold me and be close to me once more. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Ridan wa qadahi wa tasliman bi amrih. Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah. For the sake of Imam Sajjad, heal over all of our bimar, inshallah. Ya Allah, for the sake of our Sakina, may all of our children be safe and protected, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, let us live a life which you are happy with, which has no regrets. Ya Allah, this dunya, which is always keeping us away from our task towards you, forgive us for our sins, Ya Allah. And let it be that we use the time that we have for your service and for the Imam, inshallah. Ya Allah, in these days, let our dua for the reappearance of the Imam being hastened be answered, inshallah. And finally, all those who are being oppressed in these days, all those who have been shaheed, all those who have passed away, all those suffering from genocides in the Shia Qawm today, and all our marhumin in general, Ya Allah, we pray for the darajat of all of their souls, inshallah, including the marhumin of this majlis, inshallah. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم إني أسألك بحق فاطمة وبها بعدها بنيها وسلم استعوذه فيها أن تصلى محمد وعلى محمد ماتم الحسين.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. بازار شام آ گیا, بازار شام آ گیا, اکبر میرے جوان کس کو بلائیں ماں, بازار شام آ گیا, بازار شام آ گیا, زینب کی لو خبر عابد ہے ناتواں, بازار شام آ گیا, بازار شام آ گیا, دشت بلا کو چھوڑ کر خاک شفا کو اوڑھ کر, اے فخر کبریا سنو کہتی ہوں ہاتھ جوڑ کر, کیسے چلے گی ماں اے میرے نوجوان, بازار شام آ گیا, بازار شام آ گیا, قسمت کی پاسباں ہے وہ, خیر النساء کی جاں ہے وہ, غربت کی انتہا ہوئی غیروں کے درمیان ہے وہ, شہزادی جنا سہتی ہے سختیاں, بازار شام آ گیا, بازار شام آ گیا, اکبر میرے جوان کس کو بلائیں ماں, بازار شام آ گیا, بازار شام آ گیا, قاتل تیرا میرے پسر سجاد کا ہے ہم سفر, کم تو نہیں ہے یہ ستم سہتا رہا ہے وہ مگر, کیسے سہے بھلا بیمار سارباں, بازار شام آ گیا بازار شام آ گیا اکبر میرے جوان کس کو بلائے ماں بازار شام آ گیا بازار شام آ گیا میں نے سنی ہے یہ صدا کہتے ہیں شام میں سبھی بدلہ علی کا لیں گے ہم بنتے علی سے آج ہی پتھر سے ہے بھری لوگوں کی جھولیاں بازار شام آ گیا بازار شام آ گیا اکبر میرے جوان کس کو بلائے ماں بازار شام آ گیا بازار شام آ گیا نامحرموں کی بھیڑ میں اٹھتی نہیں نظر میری عباس کی قسم نہیں تشنا لبی کا غم کوئی دکھ ہے یہ میری جان سہتی ہے بیبیاں بازار شام آ گیا بازار شام آ گیا اکبر میرے جوان کس کو بلائے ماں بازار شام آ گیا بازار شام آ گیا پالا ہے جس نے عمر بھر اکبر تجھے حجاب میں غازی کے سامنے بھی وہ بیٹھی رہی نقاب میں غیروں میں بیردا جاتی ہے علما بازار شام آ گیا بازار شام آ گیا اکبر میرے جوان کس کو بلائے ماں بازار شام آ گیا بازار شام آ گیا نو کے سنا کو دیکھ کر یاور یہ کہہ رہی تھی ماں آ دیکھ تو بھی نوجوان مادر کا اپنی امتحان آنکھیں نہ بند کر غیرت سے آسمان بازار شام آ گیا بازار شام آ گیا اکبر میرے جوان کس کو بلائے ماں بازار شام آ گیا بازار شام آ گیا حسین حسین حسین
حسین حسین حسین حسین حسین حسین
کوفے کا اور شام کا منظر کوفے کا اور شام کا منظر یاد جب آ جاتا ہے بابا دل میرا پھٹ جاتا ہے بابا
کوفے کا اور شام کا منظر کوفے کا اور شام کا منظر
قبر پہ شبیر کی کہتے تھے عابد بکا
قبر پہ شبیر کی کہتے تھے عابد بکا
ہو گئی کیا کیا جفا سنیے شہ کربلا
ہو گئی کیا کیا جفا سنیے شہ کربلا
سر پہ کسی کے نہ تھی چادر یاد جب آ جاتا ہے بابا دل میرا پھٹ جاتا ہے بابا
کوفے کا اور شام کا منظر کوفے کا اور شام کا منظر
ایک رسن میں بندھے چھوٹے بڑوں کے گلے،
ایک رسن میں بندھے چھوٹے بڑوں کے گلے،
برسر دربار سب اس طرح لائے گئے،
برسر دربار سب اس طرح لائے گئے،
ہونٹوں سے برسات کے پتھر، یاد جب آ جاتا ہے بابا، دل میرا پھٹ جاتا ہے بابا،
کوفے کا اور شام کا منظر، کوفے کا اور شام کا منظر،
توخ سے ہرگز نہ تھا بابا میرا سر جھکا،
توخ سے ہرگز نہ تھا بابا میرا سر جھکا،
ہتھ کھڑی اور بیڑی کا کوئی مجھے غم نہ تھا،
ہتھ کھڑی اور بیڑی کا کوئی مجھے غم نہ تھا،
دیکھ نہیں جاتا تھا منظر، یاد جب آ جاتا ہے بابا، دل میرا پھٹ جاتا ہے بابا،
کوفے کا اور شام کا منظر، کوفے کا اور شام کا منظر،
والی سکینہ کا غم دل یہ نہیں بھولتا،
والی سکینہ کا غم دل یہ نہیں بھولتا،
سب کے تشانے بندھے اس کا بندہ تھا گلا،
سب کے تشانے بندھے اس کا بندہ تھا گلا،
درد سے وہ رہتی تھی مستر، یاد جب آ جاتا ہے بابا، دل میرا پھٹ جاتا ہے بابا،
کوفے کا اور شام کا منظر، کوفے کا اور شام کا منظر،
میری پھوپھی جان تھی بلوے میں جو سر کھلے،
میری پھوپھی جان تھی بلوے میں جو سر کھلے،
نیز سے امو میرے فرش پہ گر پڑتے تھے،
نیز سے امو میرے فرش پہ گر پڑتے تھے،
آئے چچا جان کا سفر، یاد جب آ جاتا ہے بابا، دل میرا پھٹ جاتا ہے بابا،
کوفے کا اور شام کا منظر، کوفے کا اور شام کا منظر،
جب کیا سجاد سے آ کے کسی نے سوال،
جب کیا سجاد سے آ کے کسی نے سوال،
گزرے کہاں پر امام آپ کو زیادہ ملال،
گزرے کہاں پر امام آپ کو زیادہ ملال،
کہتے تھے الشام مقرر، یاد جب آ جاتا ہے بابا، دل میرا پھٹ جاتا ہے بابا،
کوفے کا اور شام کا منظر، کوفے کا اور شام کا منظر، کوفے کا اور شام کا منظر، دمشق میں جو غریبوں کا قافلہ پہنچا، دمشق میں جو غریبوں کا قافلہ پہنچا، یزید نحسی نے دربار میں بلا بھیجا، یزید نحسی نے دربار میں بلا بھیجا، بہن سے شے کی شہادت کا واقعہ پوچھا، بہن سے شے کی شہادت کا واقعہ پوچھا، تڑپ کے بنت علی نے یزید سے یہ کہا، تڑپ کے بنت علی نے یزید سے یہ کہا، زمین کی گود میں اسلام کا ستارہ ہے، زمین کی گود میں اسلام کا ستارہ ہے، میرے غریب کو لاکھوں نے مل کے مارا، ہائے حسین پیاسے حسین، ہائے حسین پیاسے حسین، ہائے حسین پیاسے حسین، ہائے حسین پیاسے حسین، کہا یزید سے زینب نے اے ستم آرا، کہا یزید سے زینب نے اے ستم آرا، غضب کیا تیرے لشکر نے روزے عاشورا، میرے حسین کو جنگل میں گھیر کر مارا، میرے حسین کو جنگل میں گھیر کر مارا، علی کا کر دیا برباد گھر کا گھر سارا، علی کا کر دیا برباد گھر کا گھر سارا، جو بے کفن ہے ابھی تک نبی کا پیارا ہے، جو بے کفن ہے ابھی تک نبی کا پیارا ہے، میرے غریب کو لاکھوں نے مل کے مارا ہے، ہائے حسین پیاسے حسین، ہائے حسین پیاسے حسین، ہائے حسین پیاسے حسین، ہائے حسین پیاسے حسین، سہاگ اجڑا کسی کا، کسی کی کوک جلی، کسی کا جل گیا دامن ردا، کسی کی چھنی، کسی کی مانگ میں کربو بلا کی خاک پڑی، کسی کی مانگ میں کربو بلا کی خاک پڑی، علی کی آل ہے زندہ میں یا علی مددی، علی کی آل ہے زندہ میں یا علی مددی، شقی نے سبت پیمبر کا سر اتارا ہے، شقی نے سبت پیمبر کا سر اتارا ہے، میرے غریب کو لاکھوں نے مل کے مارا ہے، ہائے حسین پیاسے حسین، ہائے حسین پیاسے حسین، ہائے حسین پیاسے حسین، ہائے حسین پیاسے حسین، ادھر گئے میرے عباس و قاسم و اکبر، وہ میرے اون محمد وہ میرے نور نظر، میں تجھ کو ڈھونڈوں کہاں بے زبان علی اصغر، میں تجھ کو ڈھونڈوں کہاں بے زبان علی اصغر، بتاؤ بیویوں میں رو آج کس کس پر، بتاؤ بیویوں میں رو آج کس کس پر، جہاں میں زینب دلگیر بے سہارا ہے، جہاں میں زینب دلگیر بے سہارا ہے، میرے غریب کو لاکھوں نے مل کے مارا ہے، ہائے حسین پیاسے حسین، ہائے حسین پیاسے حسین، ہائے حسین پیاسے حسین، ہائے حسین پیاسے، یہ رنج و غم ستم اور چور و جفا کب تک، رسول زادیاں بلوے میں پیردا کب تک، رسول زادیاں بلوے میں پیردا کب تک، رہے گی قید میں اولاد مصطفیٰ کب تک، رہے گی قید میں اولاد مصطفیٰ کب تک، نبی کی آل پہ یہ ظلم ناروا کب تک، نبی کی آل پہ یہ ظلم ناروا کب تک، مجھے تو موت بھی عالم میں اب گوارا ہے، مجھے تو موت بھی عالم میں اب گوارا ہے، میرے غریب کو لاکھوں نے مل کے مارا ہے، ہائے حسین پیاسے حسین، ہائے حسین پیاسے حسین، ہائے حسین پیاسے حسین، ہائے حسین پیاسے حسین، حسین 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 حسین، بس بس حسین 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 حسین، یا امام.
The Bluetooth device is ready to pair.
السلام عليك يا عبد الله، السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله، السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين ابن سيد المرسلين، السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء سيد نساء العالمين، السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين وهو سيدتي مولاي وفضل العباس بن أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء، السلام عليك من صفاء البقراء، السلام عليك شمس الشموس عيش النفوس وزكاة النفوس، السلام عليك يا سلطان أبو الحسن علي بن موسى رضا، السلام عليك يا رسول رسول الزمان، الأمان 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 الفتنة الزمان، السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، السلام عليك يا إمام الزوجات، أجرا وتعالى فرجا وسعنا وتعالى مخرجا وسهولا وبرحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كل وليك حجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في حاصل الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرزك توا وتمتعه فيها طويلا ورحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. الرحمن الرحيم. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء 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 أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. محترم ناظرین، جناب حسن علی مرزا صاحب اور ان کے اہل خانہ کی طرف سے آپ تمام ناظرین کا میں شکریہ ادا کرنا چاہوں گا جنہوں نے آج اپنی تمام مصروفیت کے باوجود آج کی اس مجلس میں شرکت فرمائی. شہزادی کونین انشاءاللہ آپ کو اس کا بہترین اجر عنایت فرمائے. اور یہ جو دعائے شفا پڑھی گئی ہے بار راہ بیماری کربلا کے صدقے، بیماری مدینہ کے صدقے، جو جہاں جہاں بیمار ہے سب اپنے خانوادے میں ہر کوئی نہ کوئی بیمار ہے، مریض ہے. پروردگار ان تمام امراض سے ان تمام مریضوں کو جلد سے جلد شفا کلی عنایت فرمائے. ایک مرتبہ اور آپ حضرات سے گزارش کروں گا اس سے پہلے کہ ہم لوگ آپ سے ودا ہو، سورہ فاتحہ کی گزارش ہے کہ آج کے ہمارے جو مجلس کے بانی ہیں حسن بن بیگ صاحب، ان کے تمام مرحومین بالخصوص سید الخار حسن عابدی اور شمس النساء بیگم، ان کو بھی شامل کر لیجیے گا، اور تمام دیگر مرحومین جس کی آپ باضابطہ دیکھ رہے ہیں نیچے جو ایک فہرست ہے، اپنے مرحومین کو شامل کر لیجیے گا. ان سب کو، ہمارے مسلم بھائی کو بھی دیکھیے گا، اور ہمارے فیاض بھائی جو بھی لاسٹ ویک انتقال ہو گیا ان کا دبئی میں، مسلم بھائی جو صاحب بیاض وہ ہو گئے، اور اسی طرح اجاز شیخ صاحب ہے، شوکت دار صاحب ہے، یہاں کے جو مرحوم عباس بھائی ہے ہمارے، اور سراج بھائی ہے، اور نوید نقوی بھائی ہے، اور نور آنٹی ہے، اور آپ کے شور باجی ہے، خیر النساء آنٹی ہے، تمام جتنے بھی حال میں جن کا انتقال ہوا لندن میں بھی اور باہر حیدرآباد میں بھی کئی اطلاعیں ملی ہیں. سب کے لیے سورۃ المبارک الفاتحہ. بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم. مرتبہ اور آپ تمام حضرت کا بے شکریہ. اور آخر میں بس یہ دعا ہے کہ چین دنیا میں ملے، راحت عقبہ مل جائے، شدت عشق ملے، غم کا سلیقہ مل جائے، کاسے دل یہ حاضر ہے در دولت پر، فاطمہ آپ کی اولاد کا صدقہ مل جائے. السلام علیکم ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ.